This is the Fatty Joe Show, coming to you from Casa de Carrie, deep in the forests of Nutmeggerville. This show is dedicated to exploring pathways to better health from a holistic perspective. In each episode, we will explore such topics as nutrition, mental and emotional health, fitness, and more. I'm Yogi, your host, and I became interested in studying health after conventional health dogma became damaging and led me to become massively overweight. Against modern convention, I went on a keto lifestyle and I lost over 300 pounds and gained a level of control on my personal health that I never had before. Now I'm on a journey to find out what is myth and what is truth in the ever-convoluted world of what is considered healthy. Come join me on a journey of discovery as I look for a path to improve total health. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/thefattyjoeshow or patreon.com/Carrie Brown. If you want to check out all of our social media links and recipes, head to carriebrown.com. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the show.
All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to the Fatty Joe Show. This is Yogi. I am your host, and this is a Carrie Brown production because we are coming to you from Casa de Carrie, deep in the Nutmegger Forest. That is awesome. That's Connecticut, by the way. Today we have an awesome guest, and she's actually a member of the Carrie Brown Facebook groups on the Facey Space, and she has been following Carrie for some time, but she's also a doctor, and we really wanted to have her on to talk about all kinds of doctory stuff, because that's not my expertise area, and I'd like to bring somebody in that has that experience. So today we have a physician in Edmond, Oklahoma, board-certified female pelvic medicine and reconstructive surgery. Also, they has a MS in Clinical and Translational Sciences. After finishing her medical degree, she spent 3 years in academic medicine as a faculty in the University of Oklahoma Medical School. During those years, she split her time between teaching, research, and patient care. She thinks that all of those things are important, but she realizes that she did not fit in the academic environment and found a new job that will let her focus more on actual patient care. Through her practice, she cared for women with a variety of pelvic floor concerns such as urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence, and pelvic organ prolapse. Over the years, she has become to realize that much of the women's healthcare requires integrative approach. There have been some concerns that only surgery can resolve, but there are some only medication can improve. However, wherever possible, more conservative and holistic approaches should be used with a focus on each individual patient's goals. There is no magic pill or procedure that for many alignments, and oftentimes the attempt at treating one specific symptom is simply not enough for wellness overall. For what it's worth, she is also a chief medical officer for her hospital, a role that has helped her learn a great deal about healthcare systems and administrations that she was totally clueless about even after years in practice. She has come to understand the healthcare in the USA as much more complex than most people imagine and more broken than people want to admit. And this is Dr. Dena O'Leary, a rock star from our groups. How you doing, Dana?
I'm great. How are you?
That is a mouthful of an introduction.
Apparently.
So what exactly does a pelvic reconstructive surgeon do?
Well, so I treat women, obviously, not men. Basically, if you pee on yourself or poop on yourself or have vaginal problems, I'm your girl. I mean, I know that's kind of put it bluntly, but yeah, fix those things that most women have at some point in their life.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not very familiar with a lot of what goes on into the. Hold on just a second.
Mhm.
For some reason, my headset also didn't charge last night.
Oh no.
So I'm not overly familiar with that field. I have some medical experience. I used to be an EMT, but obviously that's nowhere close to what you're doing.
Right. Mhm.
But for me, it was just primary care and try to keep somebody alive to get
Right.
to the hospital.
Yeah.
And we weren't doing surgery or anything like that.
Right.
So what are some of the issues that you deal with when it comes to that cause these problems of prolapse and incontinence and things like that? What is structurally messed up down there
That's
that
not. Um, Dude, ooh, that's kind of a loaded question, actually. There's a lot of things. About half of women are going to eventually end up with some degree of incontinence. About a third of women are going to end up with at least some prolapse. And prolapse is basically just a hernia, right? The uterus or the bladder or the rectum herniating through the vagina. That's what it is, for simplest way I can say it. But nobody, sometimes you see specific anatomic abnormalities, but sometimes it's just wear and tear, right? Women have babies, they have a lot of lifting and straining over the years, tissues wear out. So there's a lot of different risk factors for it. But when somebody comes in, we talk to them, we do a good exam, and sometimes there's an anatomic problem, but sometimes it's just all physiologic, and so other things that need to be done. Does that make sense?
yeah, does obesity and being heavier than you should, does that play a role in the prolapse? And
Yes, for sure it does, especially with really incontinence more than prolapse. Anything that's going to cause extra pressure in the pelvis is going to put you at risk of what we call pelvic floor disorders. Incontinence specifically, though, just all that extra pressure on the bladder, and then there's other things like your diet, and if you have diabetes and you're spilling sugar in your bladder, then your bladder is going to be more irritated, and then you're going to be more likely to leak or more likely to get frequent infections or different things like that. So, weight loss to some extent can help with pelvic floor disorders. That doesn't mean it's the only problem. We have plenty of people who weigh 120 pounds who have a big problem, and people who weigh 300 pounds who have no problems. So just because it's a risk factor doesn't mean it's necessarily the cause. It just probably isn't helping.
which is kind of the case all the way around. I mean, we talk about risk factors for diabetes and heart disease, but we're seeing people who look very thin, who have a lot of visceral fat, higher risk factors that may not be visible, and people that don't have the visceral fat that are still prone to heart disease. And
Yep.
so
And you have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
that was done. It seems very similar.
Yeah, it is. And you also have people more than weight, but diet. If you're undernourished, which most people in America are, unfortunately, these days, your connective tissues are not going to be as strong. All your collagen is not going to be as strong, and all of those things go into pelvic floor support. So if it weakens, everything's going to weaken. So
Yeah,
it's more
I
about nutrients.
collagen and vitamin C would play a huge role in that to help build up the connective tissue as well. And that's that it's recently become to the mainstream attention of consuming more of, but for decades now, collagen wasn't a thing for
Right.
most people. And then also most people who take collagen don't realize that you need other nutrients to make the collagen work, like vitamin C.
Yes.
So that there's a synergy between the different nutrients that you take in. They all work together. You can't just take one thing and expect it to.
Yeah.
So you are a prominent member of our keto groups, and you're a doctor, and this seems to be a growing trend of more and more doctors turning to ketogenic diet to deal with personal health issues, as well as even sometimes coaching their patients about eating a lower carbohydrate diet. So what brought you into that space? What attracted you into the keto world?
Ooh, I'm sorry, my cat is anyway.
So,
But I I've kind of always been a little bit of a self-experimenter. So I've tried everything over the years just to see how it made me feel and if there was anything to it. I've done vegan and vegetarian and raw and macrobiotic and high protein, everything, all the fads. I've tried them. Mostly, I've spent a good deal of my life overweight. I think my high weight was around 260, 265. Yeah, maybe 10 years ago. And so part of that was a search for the right thing to keep that under control. But then also part of it was you hear this is the healthiest thing or that's the healthiest thing, and nobody actually knows. So I kind of always figured I'd try it and see how I felt, right? And then I watched a few years ago that Netflix video. Which one was it? I don't even. It was the big famous one that came out that had.
pill?
Yeah, that's it. So
Oh,
I saw that. That was the first time I'd ever heard of keto, honestly. I saw that and I thought, maybe I should try this one, right? And so my husband's English. So we were planning on going to the UK about 3 weeks after that to visit his family. Um, and so I told him, I was like, right. I don't think he was too happy about this. But like, we're going to be keto for 3 weeks until we go to the UK and just see how we feel, right? That was it. Was going to be 3 weeks. And we did it. And oh my goodness, I have never felt better in my life after you get first that initial, keto flu or whatever you want to call it these days. You feel poopy then. But after you got past that, I felt great. And then we went to the UK and I ate whatever I wanted and I felt terrible. And so we came back and I was like, that's it. There's obviously something to that. So the last couple of years, I've really spent a lot of time and energy just reading and listening to everything I can find. To kind of learn about it, learn about the science of it, do it right. Because, there's definitely, I think there's more than one right way to do it, but there's definitely a wrong way to do it too, because you want to be healthy and well balanced. And so, yeah, that's where I am. Here I am. I'll never go back, really.
it seems to be in the medical world. I mean, it seemed to have started with the engineers and the researchers turning to keto and saying, "Hey, this is a great thing." But now we seem to get more and more people in the medical field that are turning to them. In your area, is there a lot of doctors that have turned to keto or are more open to the idea of keto?
There's a lot that are open to it. There's a lot of doctors who are low carb, right? A lot of people who are low carb and have been for a while. But I think just keto as a term has such a stigma on it. You're not going to hear a lot of them in my area say they're keto, even though maybe all they eat is meat and green vegetables. But to so many people, when they say, even if you tell a patient, oh, do a keto diet, that is not an excuse to just go to McDonald's every day and have a hamburger without the bun, right? So many people think that that's what keto is, that a lot of medical professionals are really hesitant, at least in my circle, to recommend it, even though they will happily recommend a diet of meat and vegetables, right? So it's just
So
kind of what you call it.
so it's a little bit of semantics in play
Yes.
with the whole thing, because
Yes.
it is really a broad spectrum term. You could eat a lot of junk food that's
Hmm.
still be in ketosis.
Right.
But if you need those real Legos to build your body up, you need to find more nutrient dense foods and
Right.
for some people a larger variety of food.
Yep. Exactly.
So,
So
and you're part of the group, and we're generally a cooking kitchen group. So do you do a lot of cooking at home, or?
nope. I I have a lot of cooking equipment. Like pretend, I guess. But if I'm honest, my husband's the one that does most of the cooking.
Looks on the.
Yeah.
I can imagine because I mean, doctors' hours are traditionally, especially surgeons, pretty hairy, and you could be on call for quite a bit. Sleep is
Right.
constantly interrupted.
Mhm.
I it's funny because you guys are the ones telling us to live a healthier lifestyle.
Mhm.
Your work, much like my work as a trucker, creates a very unhealthy lifestyle for
Yes.
many doctors.
Yes. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
So, like sleep disruptions,
Hmm.
inconsistent sleep patterns, and sleep is even beyond diet. Sleep probably plays the biggest role in your health than anything else. You lack
Hmm.
sleep on a keto diet. If you miss one night's of sleep, you are now insulin sensitive, and you could even raise
Yeah.
your blood sugar.
Uh-huh.
So, with being a doctor and a surgeon, especially, that could be, almost like an ER doc, you could be on call at
Hmm.
all. How do you mitigate some of these health issues that deal with your work lifestyle?
Sleep is always a struggle. I mean, honestly, one thing I do is I just make sure I go to bed early and hope for the best. Diet, I always, it's crazy. Even in the you're in the hospital, you can't go to the cafeteria because it's all pizza and burgers and they're healthy food options, maybe pasta or something, and then when people bring food, it's always potluck and it's crap. And the doctor's lounges, it's all granola bars and peanut butter crackers and sodas. It's ridiculous. So I
That's
usually, I'm sorry.
I remember seeing a lot of donuts in the lounge.
Yes, all the time. And food is comfort. That's how, if you have a busy shift, that's how you get through is by eating sugar and drinking coffee because it makes you feel better. So
Uh,
with keto, it's easier because you can do fasting because you don't get as hungry. I'm not a big intermittent faster, but at least I know it's an option and it's not hard to do. I always make sure in my clinic I have a little refrigerator, so there's always something in there, and I always have a can of tuna or sardines or something that's going to get me through protein shake or something. So that helps. But really, it's a lot of stress management. I go to the gym a lot to work off steam.
yeah.
I feel I don't really feel like I have a ton of stress. At work, I have a lot of stress, but home life is really, really good. I have a super supportive husband who does everything. He cooks and cleans, and so I don't have to split all my attention. So I don't have the stress from that. I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about that, which is huge.
You got some
So
around though.
Huh? Oh yeah, yeah. They're all staring at each other right now, looking like they're about to fight. But yeah. So I don't know. I think stress management is huge. Sleep as much as you possibly can and do the best thing you can. I sleep much better if I'm keto though, let me tell you. Way, way better if I'm in keto.
I experienced the same thing.
Mhm.
Transferred over because I used to actually have pretty bad insomnia where I'd be up pretty much for like 3, 4 days, 5 days at a time without much sleep. I might get like an hour here and there, but
Right.
otherwise
Mhm.
I'd have these cycles. And I found the same thing on keto. I was able to sleep better and like more
Mhm.
solid. So
Mhm.
one of the reasons we called you to have you on the show is a little while ago there was a post on our Fatty Joe show group about pharmaceutical industries and doctors.
Yes.
And the post, in a quick synopsis, was all the kickbacks that doctors were supposedly getting from the pharmaceutical companies to push the 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 drugs out onto people. And I was right there with it. I'm like, yeah, yeah, because this is something that I've always been told, even by
Mhm.
other medical professionals that are in the keto space,
Mhm.
about how the drug companies are throwing bags of money through your window so that you'll prescribe their drugs. But you got on and said, no, there used to be a problem, but they've really tightened down on these things. And
Mhm.
this is kind of a pervasive myth in not just keto world, but the health world in general. Can you break this down for us and really kind of illustrate what happens between the relationship, maybe what used to happen with the pharmaceuticals, why
Mhm.
this myth be in place, and then what happens now?
Yeah, so years ago, and we're talking, 30 plus years ago, doctors did get a lot of kickbacks. They did. They'd be sent on nice vacations and taken, wined and dined and everything. But that stopped. And it stopped before I even went to medical school. And I went to medical school in 2002, I think. So it stopped a long time ago. Now we're not even allowed to take an ink pen from a farm rep, right? Like it's illegal to do that. What we can do is any of these websites where you say we accepted money, it's usually for some kind of educational thing. They'll bring Chick-fil-A or Starbucks or something to your clinic staff, and that includes you. And that is their way to get in the door to introduce whatever drug they represent, right? So it's not direct money, but it's food because they're taking up your staff's lunchtime to bring you food. Um, and then they also bring samples or whatever. So they do come in and talk about it, but we're not, nobody, I'm going to qualify this in a minute, but nobody that you are likely to see as your provider is directly taking money from a pharmaceutical rep. There are, however, people taking boatloads of money, and that are people making the decisions, right? So I think one of the most controversial things is probably cholesterol. Right? Everybody knows about cholesterol and the drugs and all that stuff, but on the ground level, the doctor that you are most likely to go see, first of all, they've been taught for their whole career that cholesterol is bad. You don't get much nutrition, if any, nutrition training in medical school. And you're taught by all these attendings and professors that you really trust that cholesterol is bad and this is what you do and you need to get the numbers lower, so you believe them, right? Which means then you're open to farm reps coming in and saying, hey, I have this drug that is going to lower the cholesterol so many points better than another one, right? So you really listen to that. But also, over the last few years, there's been this shift towards what's called pay for performance. Have you heard of that in value based purchasing?
I've heard a little bit about it, but I'm not extremely familiar with everything because I've read like three different articles and they all had conflicting information about it. So I'm not
Right.
sure what to believe. So I just say I don't know much about it.
Yep. And I think part of the conflicting information is it's constantly changing. But one of the things on the outpatient primary care side the is getting paid for they I want to say outcomes. The goal is outcomes. It's not necessarily outcomes, rather than just seeing patients, right? Like traditionally, patient comes in, you get paid no matter what you did or what the outcome was. The fee was the same. Now pay is tied to outcomes, and CMS, Centers of Medicare Medicaid Services, set these guidelines every year that you're supposed to follow. And they're going to be a little bit different based on specialty, but internal medicine and family medicine are two big primary care ones, right? One of the ones that they have to do is cholesterol, right? So if you have patients with whatever insurance participates in this, and then every year that you're required to test their cholesterol every year. And if it is above whatever threshold the expert societies say, then you're required to prescribe them a medication to lower it even further, right? And if they don't, or you don't, then there is a significant financial penalty. Your reimbursement actually gets reduced. And a lot of the payers that do this are like Medicare, for example, they're the biggest one. They, for an annual exam, what they reimburse for an annual exam does not even cover the cost of overhead for that annual exam. It is so low. So whenever they're reducing that even further, physicians can't afford to take the hit. They also get reported as having poor outcomes in national databases, right? So then licensure companies come and stuff. So the issue with prescribing things like statins is much more to do with regulatory stuff than anything else, which means the drug companies know this, right? So they're throwing tons of money at the CMS, or I don't know about CMS, but they're throwing tons of money at the people who make the guidelines and who set the standards, because everything is supposed to be based on evidence-based medicine and standard of care. So if you're not following the standard of care, you're deviant, right? So the money is not going to the physician on the ground. The physician on the ground is following the rules that they have been told to follow. The money is going to the agencies making the rules and setting the guidelines.
The government.
So there is a lot of money going to the American Heart Association and American Diabetic Association and all these other things, because they're the ones setting policies. But it's not the doctors themselves getting the money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I've read some similar things in the past, but they still didn't dispel the myth that the doctors were receiving. They did talk about the lobbying efforts, the financial support to political parties from pharmaceutical companies, and they did talk about the financial support for like American Heart Foundation, Medicare, Medicaid, and the American Diabetes Association, which is much funded by Coca-Cola and so like that. So there definitely seems to be a conflict of interest when it comes to healthcare, when it comes from the top.
Yes.
It's way down. And does that hamstring a lot of the way you would want to treat a patient?
Oh, absolutely. I don't prescribe that many medications personally in my field, but yeah, everything you want to do on the outpatient side, if you want to talk about diet on the hospital side too, there's every year, in order to keep your whatever different licensure statuses, because there's all sorts of them, the hospital, one of the things they have to do is review their dietary guidelines and make sure that their dietary book for all the different diets, soft, mechanical, diabetic, heart healthy, whatever diet a physician wants to order, you click the button in the computer, say, I want this patient to have a diabetic diet while they're in the hospital, right? And you assume they're going to get a diabetic friendly diet, but you get what is in the dietary department's book of a diabetic diet. That is based on, again, national standards. If your hospital's dietary guidelines are not in line with whatever agency it is that says they need to be X, Y, or Z, then you are at risk of your hospital losing its license, right? So, for example, because I'm a chief medical officer at my hospital, I was in a meeting where we were reviewing the dietary guidelines about a year ago, and the dietitian comes in, presents the one for the diabetes diet, and their cutoff is 60 carbs per meal for in the hospital for the diabetic diet. And every physician in the room, because I work for a hospital system and we're on each hospitals have a CMO and we're all on this committee, right? And every one of us in here go, wait, this is the diabetic diet? Every doctor was like, that's too many carbs for a diabetic diet, 60 per meal, plus they have snacks. And she goes, yes, but it's whatever organization sets the rules. So if we don't follow that, then we can be fined or whatever. So therefore, at the hospital level, guess what? Your diabetic diet is going to allow you to have 60 carbs a meal.
And that's pretty insane, because if you try, now I'm a big guy, I could easily do 60 carbs eating leafy greens.
Right.
But if you get 60 carbs per meal with leafy greens, you're going to be working hard.
Right.
The only real way to get those 60 carbs is with a concentrated form of carbohydrate like bread, sugar, and fructose, and then you're going over.
Then you're going way over.
So
Yes.
there isn't a happy medium there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, two
So,
slices of bread can take you over that.
oh, easy. Yeah. So they, it's crazy because you have administrators, you have physicians, and I'm not going to say we all know, but a bunch of us know. But at the same time, if you're trying to stay operational, you follow the rules that you've been given.
Yeah.
So,
Now, recently, the American Diabetes Association did come out with a article saying that the ketogenic diet may be an effective diet to help treat diabetes. Has that changed the standards of what they are putting out for you guys at all? Is it made it more friendly to maybe reduce the carbs in the diet?
not not yet that I'm aware of. I think it's a little too soon. It usually takes a few years for everything else to catch up once a statement is made. And I think that there's still so much controversy because a lot of people making the nutritional guidelines are not super keto friendly. I think we all know that. And then there's still this kind of war between plant based versus, omnivore. And I think it's too controversial right now. And then it's not helping that the national nutrition guidelines are a mess at the moment. I'm sure you've read about all of that, but
Yeah, I've been keeping abreast on some of it. Sometimes I get so I have to put stuff down for a while.
uh-huh.
Yeah, I know on Facey Space, a lot of people have gotten snoozed lately because of the political stuff that I just like, I've had enough. And
Yes. Mm-hmm.
so sometimes this war between the dietary factions gets to that point on me as well, because it seems to get down to more of the ad hominem responses toward each other rather
Yeah.
than the research.
Yeah.
And that's a problem in my eyes.
Yes, for sure. And I think, and that goes back to the money. Like you said, Coca-Cola and Nestle, they're two big ones that spend a lot of money pushing their agenda. And I mean, the doctors doing the research, they are taking the money. Maybe not the doctor down the street that's caring for you and your family, but there there are doctors taking money, but it's the ones in high power positions making decisions at the national level that everybody else is just required to follow.
Let, let's kind of touch into, because you were a researcher as well. Let's touch into research and how the funding toward research comes into play when it comes into dietary research.
Um, well, I've never done dietary research specifically, but in general, funding for medical research can come from a variety of sources. Um, uh, One, you can get money from companies, you can get money from NIH, you can be self-funded. Usually the self-funded stuff are things like chart reviews, retrospective studies that you can just, all you need is time, really. You don't actually need money. Most of the studies that are funded by drug companies, though, um, which I think a lot of people don't realize this, they'll be multi-institutional, right? So you'll have a bunch of different sites that they recruit lead investigators from each site to participate. Well, each site is given a study protocol designed by the company, not by necessarily the academic physician or researcher that is on it. And then they enroll people based on the methods and study protocol that they've been given. And then they collect the data and then they send the data back to the company, right? And the company is the one interpreting it. And then order of authors usually goes to either who has the most name recognition or who did the most enrollment, right? But just because you are an author on a paper doesn't mean you actually did the data analysis. Not for these company sponsored things. It's different if you have an NIH grant or something like that, then those people are doing it themselves in conjunction with a biostatistician or whatever. But anything that's, you've got to be real careful with anything sponsored by a company, because the company is designing it and putting some well-known physicians or academic researchers who, not always a physician, name on it, and they're also doing the data analysis, and they're doing most of the writing of it too, right? And a lot of all doctors are trained in how to read the literature to a certain extent, um, but not necessarily, they know the basics, right? They don't know all the ins and outs of all the different forms of bias and all that other stuff if they haven't gone and done either a PhD or at least a, epidemiology sort of, some kind of research oriented thing. So at the end of the day, then most doctors they'll read the abstract of a paper and say, oh, this sounds good, and make decisions based on that. And the companies know that, so they'll put little snippets, a one-liner thing that they want everybody to see in the abstract, knowing that most people are never going to actually critically read the entire article because there's just not enough time.
I read a book. I'm trying to remember the name of it because it was a few years ago that I read it, but it was talking about how marketing companies will sometimes present their marketing paperwork for the drugs as a research paper.
Yes.
And there's no research on it. They just make stuff up, and they're well enough in the writing of clinical science type wording that they sound like it, and then you read it, you think it's a research paper, and you move on.
Yep.
So that goes on.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. That goes on, or they'll base it on. So when you do research, you can have a full publication, or you can do a presentation. That's a annual scientific meeting of whatever specialty. And if it's a presentation, there's different categories. There's poster presentation, there's oral presentations, there's a hybrid called oral posters or whatever. But you can put these presentations as a publication on your CV because it was published in the scientific meetings little guide, right? Which is usually, for example, I'm urogynecology, so our society is the American Urogynecologic Society. So every year we have an annual scientific meeting. So anything that is all of the little abstracts, which is just the very brief 200 to 500 word little synopsis of the whole research thing, of every study that gets presented at that scientific meeting goes into a little pamphlet that's in addition to the journal that we have. And since it's in addition to the journal, it counts as a publication, even if it was never really peer reviewed or no full analysis was ever done. I mean, a good example of this is there's one surgical device that a device rep came to me, tried to get me to use. I was like, okay, well, where's your data for this? And she's like, oh, there's all these papers, there's 3 different things, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, can you show me? I'll find them. I'll see if I can find them. First of all, that was my first clue. If she really had something, she would have had it in her hand ready to show me, right? And then a couple weeks later, she called and said, hey, do you want to try it? I was like, I still haven't seen any data behind your stuff. Oh, I'll get it to you. And she sends me literally a photo of the poster that was at this meeting that it was presented at and said, here you go. I was like, this is all you have? I'm not going to use a new surgical device on any of my patients, right? Based on a photo of a poster that you have that you're calling research. It's ridiculous. But I hate to say it, plenty of people would, because there's plenty of people who they want to try the newest thing, or they have a connection with the rep. That's where the reps get you, not the money. It's the friendliness, and you become friends with them when you see them, and you're like, oh, how are the kids, and whatever. You develop relationships with them, and then you want to try their product because now they're your friend, right? That's a much more pervasive issue than actual money.
That book I was reading, the marketing guy, he had made up a complete bull crap article. And it sounded like, he said the one of the shining lights that he might be causing a problem is he actually read his advertising in a prominent medical journal, presented as though it was
Oh
medical.
no.
And he was like, I don't know what I've just done here.
Yeah. And you don't know, unless you go to some source like PubMed and search it and see if it is actually legitimate, you don't know. And most professionals are not going to do that. They're going to take it at face value. If they have something that looks legitimate and sounds good, then unfortunately they're going to fall for it.
So this pervasive type of behavior that may put things into the public that are not necessarily tested, tried, and proven isn't just the medications, but it's the devices and equipment as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting better. I think. Well, so a good example that probably anybody who watches TV is going to know about is going to be like the pelvic mesh, right? You see
Yeah.
all the commercials on TV about this mesh was recalled or whatever. We do still use mesh in specific situations, but part of the problem is there was all this time mesh used to repair hernias, right? Well, pelvic organ prolapse is a kind of hernia, right? So then they tried to translate that mesh into pelvic floor stuff. And then there was a loophole to go through the FDA looking at safety based on prior products, right? So they went off of the old safety data for different types of mesh and different types of procedures, piggybacked onto that instead of having to use their own new rigorous studies. So the material technically was safe, the intention was good, but on the back end, a lot of problems started coming about with specific types of the things that they were doing. Not all of them, again, but so it's things like that. There's loopholes that are slowly being closed with time that allow new devices to kind of rest on the laurels of older devices, so they don't have to go through the same rigorous testing to get out there on the market as others. So, yeah.
And
it's kind of scary.
Yeah, and people still today, as much people say that they don't, you hear constant posts, will you really trust the government? But people really do still trust the government and the medical system to have best interest at heart 100% of the time. And that will always be the case.
Yeah.
So when you got back into caring with your patients, you talked about wanting to go toward a more holistic approach, which is honestly seems to be a rare thing, especially in the surgical fields.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a few of you guys out there, you, Dr. Sean Baker, who have decided to take more of a holistic approach from a aspect. But doctors in general, they tend to look at treating symptoms rather than the ultimate cause of the systems of what might have created that symptom in the first place. So when you're working with a patient for the pelvic issues, what is some of the holistic things, the mechanisms that you would look at to address to help people? You mentioned diet, but what are like certain key factors in the diet? Maybe certain foods or certain lifestyle interventions that may be beyond food, exercise, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I try to kind of loop in. I operate almost every day, but honestly, surgery should always be the last resort. There's some things that have to have surgery, right? There's some things that you're just like, yeah, there's no other option here. But a lot of times, at least in what I do, there are other options. There's plenty of other options. There's dietary modification. If you have, say, what's overactive bladder, which is when you go to the bathroom all the time. Okay, well, before I throw a medicine at you, or before I inject Botox in your bladder to calm it down or something like that, then why don't we look at what you're eating, right? Are you drinking 3 Mountain Dews a day? Are you having coffee all night? Are you smoking? Are you, drinking alcohol before bed and then wondering why you're peeing all night? So, um, are you, lots of different things like that. Again, the blood sugar issue, looking at different dietary triggers. Everybody knows the gut is connected to everything. And vaginal infections and bladder infections and things like that are no exception. So sometimes if you get your gut microbiome under better control, you're going to have better outcomes everywhere else. If different things like dietary and behavioral modification don't help, then physical therapy is a great, great thing. There's ladies who do what's called pelvic floor physical therapy. They are miracle workers. And if you have a committed patient who's willing to put in the work, just like any exercise, right? They can fix a lot of things without really needing much else and teach you habits to be able to move forward, minimize the risk of things long term. So, and then of course there's, different medications you can try and things too. But it's just, you have to kind of see what's going on with the patient and everything that's going on and try to tie it all together. And sometimes that means picking up the phone and calling another doctor and saying, hey, I've got this. Can we work together here? Because it's not all things I'm a specialist in, but yeah.
How, I mean, this is a challenge in our daily society to get people to make lifestyle changes.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're working with a patient, rough percentage wise, how often do people take the advice to make changes in their lifestyle, or how many are just like, just give me the surgery, I'm not giving up my Mountain Dew?
Probably 50-50, honestly. I think in my area, I live in a suburb of Oklahoma City, so I think there's probably a few more people in my practice than there are whenever I was at the university hospital, right? But yeah, some people are very motivated, and some people are, even if they want to, they're like, look, I've got 5 kids, I'm a busy person, I know I'm not gonna sit here and do my physical therapy exercises every day, or I know that for whatever life circumstance, I'm not going to change my diet or whatever. So even if they have good intentions, they won't. Some people come in though and say, like, I absolutely under no circumstances do I want any medication or procedure. Well, what can I do outside of that? So you get both extremes.
Is there typically like a segment of population that's more apt to go for the holistic route than another segment?
No, it always surprises me, honestly.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I've gotten to where I just ask every patient where they're at and what they're really looking for, um, because I cannot predict it. They will always. I can walk in and think, oh, this person, there's no way they're gonna listen to me telling them to not drink coffee at 10 p.m. But they'll surprise you, and sometimes, or tell them to stop smoking. That's another one that they'll surprise you. They're like, it's really surprising actually how often they're looking for an excuse to stop smoking or an excuse to get their diabetes under control. And if all you have to say is, guess what? You might not have these frequent infections if you stop smoking. That's all it takes. They may have been someone tried to scare them with cancer or whatever all these years and it didn't work, but something that has an immediate impact on their life. Or the diabetes one, I won't operate. Everything I do is elective, so I'm not going to operate on you if your blood sugar is not controlled, right? Too risky. I'm not going to put you at a risk of poor wound healing and surgical complications, right? So if you don't have a controlled A1C, I'm not going to operate on you. So if you really want surgery, guess what? I've had quite a few people come in and say, okay, I'm going to do it. They go off and we work together and we try to get their diabetes under control. 3 months later, they've gone from an A1C of 12 to 7. I'm like, okay, now you can have surgery, sort of thing. So
There's a growing movement of doctors. It's still in the infancy, but doctors kind of leading the charge, like Mark Hyman and the Weston A. Price Foundation, Integrative Nutrition Society,
Hmm.
that are working to pair health coaches with
Right.
doctors. Is that something at all that is happening or could happen in your area?
It could, and I think I would love it if it would. There's not really anybody that I know of in my area doing that, but I think it's fantastic, really, for almost anything, because in medicine we've become so specialized, right? And everybody knows this. You focus on, you don't even have necessarily a cardiologist. You have a cardiologist who focuses on one blood vessel, or a lipidologist, or for me, I I'm board certified in OBGYN. It's been 10 years since I delivered a baby, and I don't do any routine gynecology or anything, right? So I have that board certification, but I don't do it. I have this very narrow scope of practice. And you see that in every specialty. Orthopedics, you'll have somebody who focuses just on like one hand, or, instead of the whole body. And so I think you have to look at the patient as a whole, right? Because there's lots of things going on, especially by the time you get to the age of some of my patients. I see younger patients, but you're usually looking at the postmenopausal on up. I mean, I see lots of 60, 70, 80, 90-year olds who have a lot of other issues that need to be taken into account whenever you're looking at anything. Whether, even if they do have a surgical problem, they've got a lot of other health problems that need to be addressed before you can even think about surgery. So if you have something who could be a health coach, that would be huge for patients, because in my experience, most patients want to change, right? They come in, and I see people all the time. Say somebody comes in for urinary incontinence, and the first thing I'll say, why are you, what brings you to see me? And they'll say, well, I know I'm fat, but, and I'm like, we're not, your problem is not because you're fat, right? Your problem, maybe you're 300 pounds and 5'0" or whatever, and that is causing problems, but it doesn't mean I can't help you. And a lot of people they're embarrassed, right? So they're embarrassed to go to the doctor because they don't want to be judged. One of the reasons that they're judged is because doctors always tell them to lose weight, and not always in the nicest way, and they're not always very helpful. Um, but then they also feel hopeless because they're not ever given the advice they need to go to the doctor. The doctor's like, okay, here's an example. I saw a patient last week who I was reading the referral notes. Their doctor told them to lose weight, and the description of what the doctor had told them, I don't know if they ever actually said this, or if this was just some kind of quick text, pre-made note that was popped in there, but it said, eat lots of fruits, choose fruits with light syrup, um, at least half of your diet in whole grains. And I'm sitting here reading this going, oh
Everything.
my goodness. Yes, but this patient in this note had gone to the doctor because they said, I need to lose weight. And this is the advice they've been given. And it's advice they've been given because that's what the doctors have been told to give. And it's terrible. So if we have, anyway, that's a long way of saying, if we had something like you're saying with health coaches that could be really integrative, that'd be
Yeah,
amazing.
the Cleveland Clinic has been doing some pretty remarkable work in that area. And like one of the things that they started doing with some of their low income patients is making food prescriptions
Mm-hmm.
to medical insurance companies to actually pay for some of the groceries to get people on healthier. And they've partnered with certain medical insurance places going, look, this will lower your overall cost of
Right.
treatment if we could just get these people to eat right. So
Yeah.
you'll spend little money here, but you won't spend so much more money treating diabetes and cancer, because
Mm-hmm.
you often go after the or the medical insurance companies, but they don't think about the fact that every time you're sick, that costs the insurance company
Yes.
money.
Yes, exactly. I mean, food and diet is so key. One thing that reminds me, though, as far as the underserved areas, I had to do when I was working on my master's degree. I took a class in social epidemiology, right? Probably the most useful class I've ever taken in all of my years of school, right? And one of the things we had to do as our semester project was we had to do something called a windshield survey. Have you ever heard of that? I swear that every medical student should be required to do a windshield survey. So what this was is we were paired with someone else in the class. We were given 2 zip codes, right? One affluent zip code in the area and one poor zip code in the area, kind of with some of the worst health outcomes. We have this health report card, so we know which zip codes in our state have terrible outcomes and health outcomes or whatever. And we had to do what's called a windshield survey, which means we looked at the map, started on one end of the zip codes, and went up and down every street, north to south, all the way till we got to the other end. And then we went east to west, right? And so we covered literally every street in each of these neighborhoods, and we had to take pictures, and we had to check, different things like how many fast food places are there, how many grocery stores are there, how many parks are there for outdoor activities, we had to go in the grocery stores and check the price of water versus the price of soda versus how many aisles of the grocery store are devoted to vegetables and meat as opposed to potato chips, right? And we had to do it, and then we had to compare the 2 zip codes, and the difference was shocking. And that's what taught me a lot of patients. They want to be compliant, and they want to be compliant with their diet, but the poor zip code we had one grocery store, and it was on the south street of the like the very last street of the zip code, and you could get a case of water for $10 or something. I don't remember how much it was, but a case of Coke for $2, right? And most of the store space was devoted to processed foods because it was cheaper, and then if they didn't, there's terrible public transportation in my area, right? So there was no really public transportation to get to the store. So the whole rest of the zip code, what are they supposed to do? They go to the gas stations, and what do you get at gas stations? Crap, right? So they live off of processed things. And then there's a food desert here in my area where the only grocery store in the entire zip code is one that someone put up in their house, and they go to Sam's Club or Costco and get mac and cheese and granola bars and then bring it back and sell it out of their house. So you can tell people to eat healthy all you want, but if they can't physically get to the store to get the stuff, they're not going to do it. And then they go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, I told them to do it. They're just non-compliant. And then they give up on them. And then they give up on the doctors because nobody's helping them.
Yeah. The food desert situation, there's a promise now or a potential now that these might be alleviated a bit with a lot of the online grocery shopping that's now occurring. But even in some of these areas, there may not be a delivery option for these people, especially what's going on now in current events. So these food deserts are very much a real thing, and that when you look at it, it raises health risks and lowers opportunity. Areas.
Exactly. And those places, those areas also, they don't have they don't have the money for the healthy foods. They don't have maybe online shopping, but maybe they don't have internet because they can't afford it, or they don't have the computer or whatever. So you have that problem. And then you have people who want to change, and they just, when doctors are told they can spend 10 minutes with a patient, they don't have time to sit there counseling them and teaching them how to do it. And I hate to say it, but a lot of doctors, because nutrition is not part of our training, don't really know what to say. So you say, go see a nutritionist. And we know what the nutritionists tell them.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the doctor that prescribed fruit in light syrup, which is fruit in sugar water.
Right.
And if we look at the animals in the wild, and we look at natural cycles, well, especially in the northern and southern hemispheres, the sugary foods, the root vegetables, the high starch stuff, the fruit, always ripens toward the end of the year when the animals are all trying to put on weight.
Mm-hmm.
So the fruit drives weight gain in all these animals who are trying to put on the fat, mammals specifically, and birds, avians, who are trying to put on the fat to get through winter. So prescribing somebody fruit,
Yep.
it just have enough sense to look at common area, in
I
would know
know.
that is.
I know. It's terrible. There's this misunderstanding, and it's everywhere. It's not. It's just everywhere in society, really, that bad things are McDonald's and potato chips and, I don't know, anything from the freezer section, ice cream or whatever, and anything like fruit is good, whole grains are good. I mean, it's.
And we also know that now whole grains can spike your blood sugar even further
Mm-hmm.
than bread can, and
Yep.
white bread is pretty high.
Yes, exactly. And that doesn't even get into the whole anti-nutrient issue with a lot of these things that people are really just starting to recognize that whole issue. But yeah, it's a
I
mess, and I don't even know how to fix it, really.
I think a lot of it's going to go with public education as much as possible. But at the same time, even as with the COVID situation, it's the same with nutrition, several other issues. There's so many conflicting opinions being presented as facts that it makes it very hard for a consumer of the information who doesn't have any kind of knowledge or background to disseminate between the quality information
Mm-hmm.
and the fictions that are being
Yes.
thrown away. So
Yes.
then also, uh, we do know that religion practices have played a huge role in our current
Mm-hmm.
guidelines, which these are presented also as fact. And I'm not trying to knock religion, but when there comes to be a point where somebody in the late 1800s has a vision that we should all be eating vegetable matter and it's not okay
Mm-hmm.
to eat animals, and they had a vision that back in our ancient times we were all vegans,
Right.
you not want to take that information and run with it as whole fact and dogma.
Uh-huh. Have you read the new book, Sacred Cow, yet?
Not yet. I've heard about it. I'd like to read it. That is not Mar that is the he was one of the paleo leaders. And
Rob Wolf.
Wolf, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, him and Diane Rogers. So I just finished it, and you should read it. It is fantastic because I learned a lot. I need to read it again because there was a lot to unpack in this book, but it's really good because it takes the whole omnivore versus vegetarian debate and breaks it into nutrition, climate change, and ethics, and gives the argument for all of it. And basically, the end conclusion is everybody should be a nutrivore, right? And meat obviously is not bad. Look at the people who wrote it, that's going to end up being the conclusion. But there are some things they say in there that I found very surprising. They make some really good points. But back to what you say, it's true. People, there's so much dogma and religion about it, and that's part of why it's so hard to change in healthcare too. Not the religion part, but just kind of as an analogy to that. Like if you figure, okay, for my specialty, I went to college. You have 4 years of college. You have 4 years of medical school. You have 4 years of residency. Then you have 3 years of fellowship. So what is that? 15 years, right? So when you start college at 18, 19 years old and you finish at 34 years old, you have spent literally half or more of your life and your entire adult life being taught certain things, right? And being taught by people who are well respected in your field, being taught by people that you like and you've come to admire and all these other things. And then you get out in your own practice and you start seeing, oh, maybe I should start thinking for myself, because you don't have your attendings there to just ask for help anymore. And so people go one of two ways. They start realizing, okay, maybe everything I've learned is not quite accurate. Kind of like a kid who goes to college and gets away from their parents who were raised in whatever religion, and then they're exposed to other things and they think, okay, maybe I really need to sit here and think for myself. But that change is hard. So one of the problems you have with doctors is they've been taught for decades of training one way. And just like it's hard to change your mind in a religion, it's really hard to change your mind, because all of a sudden you're like, well, what do I believe? And do I have time to do decades of research to convince me otherwise? So it's just that whole, that change is very much like changing a religion, which is part of the battle.
And I just had Peter Ballerstedt on the other day. We were talking about something similar, and part of this is the tribal mentality of people. We have an innate instinct that being around other people, and yes, there are extroverts that want to be away and hermits and stuff, but they are generally exceptions to the rule, which is why society looks at them as weird.
Yeah.
But generally, most people want to be part of the group, and when you start spouting alternative ideas to your group, it can exclude you from that group that you want to belong to. To continue being in that group could make you even go against things that you would generally in your heart believe not to be true or to be true, because if you speak out on these things, it will remove you from that group dynamic, that safe that's in that group. We even today, the gravitation of people wanting to be in cliques or even political groups or things that people will justify the things that their politicians will do, that they will preach that they have certain values and their politician is the antithesis of those values.
Yes.
But they're like, that's our guy, or that's the person. They are the purest form of our values. Meanwhile, the politician's doing everything they can to like bring every seven deadly can.
I know, it's crazy.
That's the guy.
I know. I think in anything, it's really hard to change. And once you've been taught one thing, nobody has to prove it to you to convince you the first time. But once you're convinced, the burden of proof to change your mind for something else is ridiculously high. And that's why I think there's been some good movements in lots of areas, especially healthcare, but it just is so slow. It's such a dinosaur, because people don't like change, first of all, and they're scared of it. And there's always the question of, well, if we truly were wrong then, or what's to say we're not wrong now and there's still something even better?
I think a lot of issues of people mistrusting science and going, well, look, they were wrong before, is they don't understand how science works.
Right.
And they don't understand science is a constant pattern of a constant seeking of discovery and new information. That if you're properly doing science, you should be changing your mind with new information that comes up.
Exactly.
I think that's a challenge of this day and age, because again, back to the dogma thing, people are so dogmatic about their thinking that they think once you have the information, you should never change your mind. They told kale was healthy, so I'm on the all kale diet for
right
years. I've lost a foot, but I'm healthy.
Right.
My kidneys don't work anymore, but I'm eating my.
I'm kind of on this whole micronutrient kick right now. I kind of feel like I'm good with macronutrients. I know, what I need, how to arrange that. So with chronometer, however you say that app, love the app, because they give you can set it to give you all the micronutrient breakdown. And I'm a data geek, right? So I'm looking at it. I started logging my food. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm really low on threonine. I don't even know what threonine is, but what can I do to get it, right? So it's kind of at this point now where instead of when I log my food, instead of looking so much at macros because I know pretty well where I am, I pull up that list and I'm like, okay, how can I? It's almost like a puzzle. What can I mix and match to eat to help me meet all of those? And I have to say, I have you to thank for me finally unlocking the puzzle because there were a few key things I was always struggling with. And then I made your super mother clucker burgers,
Yeah.
right? Um, well, what I did is I was afraid of them. I'm not gonna lie, right? They turned out I mixed them up and I was like, this is red, this is chicken, it's not supposed to be red. But I went with it. But I was kind of too afraid of them to eat a whole patty, so I made little meatballs. They were like 1 ounces each. But then I put it in the chronometer app, and one meatball fixed. It like turned everything green after everything else I ate that day. So I thought, oh my goodness, now I'll constantly have a bag of your little super mother clucker meatballs that are like 1 ounce size in there. So if I get to the end of the day and I think, oh, I'm missing all these nutrients, all I have to do is cook one, and it's 10 grams of protein and 5 grams of fat and all the extra nutrients that maybe I missed that day. So thank you.
Oh no. For those of you who don't know, Carrie and I, well, Carrie started it. She's got a blog with a lot of recipes, and when I came on the picture, some of my recipes started getting added in. One of the recent ones that we put out a while back was our superfood burgers that incorporate some organ meat into the burgers, and one of them is the Super Mother Clucker, and the other is the Power Porky's dry chili burgers, and they both incorporate liver, the chicken liver, and the Power Porky's actually incorporates beef liver because pork liver is hard to find. And the reason why we did this is because liver is so high in micronutrients, and it's a good source that is inexpensive of having a incredibly bioavailable multivitamin that you can put into it that has a lot of the nutrition your body needs to keep all the systems functioning. But in the US, people are afraid of liver in a lot of areas because they haven't grown up with it. It smells funny. It has a funny texture. So we ground it up and put it into a burger, and we had to play around with the burger to make sure that it can hold together when you cook it, which is a challenge because liver is so fall apart.
Yep.
So it's so it's fragile that when you combine it to ground meat, it kind of turns the ground meat into mush. So we had to play around with it. But we also incorporated a lot of herbs and things like that. The Super Mother Cluckers actually taste a lot like a breakfast sausage.
Yep. They're good. They really are good. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Power Porkies because I do like the red meat above the chicken, but I also like spicy a lot. And so I made the Power Porkies very spicy.
I haven't tried that yet because I need to get some beef liver. And I grew up on liver and onions, liver and bacon and onions. I like that. My husband, not so much.
You may like the spicy beef liver and bacon pate.
No, yeah, because that's the thing. I don't understand him because he will eat pate every single day with bread and butter on it with it as well. But he turns his nose up at liver. But whatever, he gets it in there somehow. But yeah, beef liver. My only problem with beef liver is cutting it up is disgusting. Right, I have a hard time getting past that.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, you cut up.
Throw it in the food processor.
Yeah, that's what I did with the chicken. So I think I just need to do that. Yeah.
Throw it, and it'll actually hold up a bit better if you bring it to just about freezing, still kind of soft. But if you use a meat grinder or a food processor and you bring it to just about freezing, it'll hold up better when you put it together.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big key. But the pate is something I used to make in the truck and keep in the truck. I'd make a big batch of it and throw some in the freezer, and it was a great way of getting a cold meal in that I didn't have to cook, and I would have a lot of times just sliced cucumber or zucchini or something, and I'd put it on that and eat it.
Okay.
Sometimes I'd eat it by the spoonful. So
I need to try it. I've never been a big pate person, but I,
yeah,
I can convert. I'm a very textural eater, so I have problems sometimes with, even if the flavor's good, with the texture of certain things.
it is a bit of a softer texture. It's a lot like a deviled ham texture.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that. But we were talking about micronutrients, and one of the things that I always equate to people about the micronutrients, because especially in the Ketoverse, up until recently, all we heard was macro, macro, macro. I think that's the most important thing, macro, macro, macro. But I equate to people like we're Legos. We're composed of all these little microscopic building blocks that form us, that can do different functions in our body. And in order to make those functions work properly, we need the right Legos. We need the right pieces to go in to build our Millennium Falcon Lego body. And so getting those micronutrients in there gives the body a proper building blocks to actually do the functions it needs to do.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I have found recently is I was stalled out for a few weeks. I've been on my fat loss journey. I've been stalled out about 300 pounds. And I've been fluctuating, and I fluctuate quite a bit of weight within a day. And I've been bouncing between 300 and 308 back and forth. And I just finally dropped under the 300-pound mark. And one of the things that I did, because I adjusted some things in my diet, but one of the things I did was I started incorporating things for metabolism function, and namely B vitamins. And make my bone broth, and I started mixing I use keto chow a lot because I don't always have a lot of time to cook, even though we make the recipe for the blogs and sometimes we just get burned out on cooking and we're just like, yeah, we're done. Right. Because we'll go for like a week and make like 100 and something recipes in a week, and then we're like, we tap out, we're done. So I've been using the keto chow a lot. So I've been mixing the keto chow, and then I've been mixing a clean nutritional yeast for the beta vitamins, and it gives a very umami, cheesy like flavor to the bone broth, almost like a cheesy kind of soup.
Oh.
And that's what I've been doing. And I've also incorporated a lot more naturally farmed eggs in the local area, which are high in cholesterol. I always mispronounce that word. Colostrum.
Okay.
They're high vitamins with the yolks, and they actually have a lot of the same nutrition, especially if you get a higher quality egg, has a lot of the same nutrition in the yolks as liver does.
Okay. Which I knew. They say that, what is it, eggs and oysters are two of the healthiest foods you can really eat.
Oysters are one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet for the size, and I do love some oysters to keep a lot.
Me too.
And I'll kill a bunch of oyster shooters at a place. So
I know I have to be careful because that gets real expensive. I think I've ordered 3 dozen before. It's just not so bad.
But I also want to caveat this too, is you also have to look at what functions with your body in particular. Right. Oysters may be one of the most nutrient-dense, healthy foods on the planet, but if you're allergic to oysters, they're now toxic to you and you shouldn't consume. So I have to caveat with, you have to eat what works for your body. If you're getting a negative reaction from something you're eating, don't continue eating it. And regardless of what it is, and try to find that nutrition in a different package, so to speak. So we're closing in on over an hour now, and it's it has been fantastic talking to you and having you on. And I definitely want to have you on to talk about some more stuff. I think
Okay.
I might call you to be our resident, one of our resident physicians to come in.
Okay, I'll do it.
Awesome. That would be cool. And I definitely have, I spoke on this about this before on the podcast, but I definitely want to do a series of podcasts on women's health issues. So I would
Sure.
love to have you as one of the contributors to
Yes.
that. Oh, and one of the things that we're going to be starting to do very soon, and we are going to be doing a Rockstar Roundtable, where we're going to bring in some of the Fatty Joe rock stars to be guests on the group. We're going to bring in 2 at a time, and that's going to be the round table. And so definitely want to bring you in that, pair you with somebody inside the group, and bring you guys on to have a 3-way conversation.
Okay, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this has been this episode of the Fatty Joe Show. And before we go, I almost forgot, before we go, I like to ask 5 questions, and they're short answer questions. And these questions are basically something you can give a quick answer for, and it's to, 1, give people more resources, and 2, when people listen to the episodes, they can pull a consensus on some of the questions and go, well, maybe these things really are bad for us, or these things really are good for us. Because a lot of people answer with the same answer.
Okay.
There's variations, so we'll see if it gets there.
Okay.
The first question, or who are your 5 health heroes? Who are the people that inspired you to change your lifestyle on a healthy journey?
Nina Tashels. I may say these names wrong. Well, Carrie. She's one. Tobbs.
Yes.
Obviously. How many is that? 3? I would say Tim Noakes. And I've got to say the keto dudes, the 2 keto dudes. I'm just going to put them together as one, because that was huge whenever I first got into keto. Hugely helpful.
Amazing how big of a difference some of these podcasts are making for people.
Yes, they did. And they also helped me kind of steer me towards references and places, to do my own research. But also, my stepdad was horribly controlled diabetic, right? At the same time I started getting into, like, he's got the diabetic retinopathy, he's got the neuropathy, his A1C was above the level that the lab could measure or whatever. So I really leaned on some of their advice as people who are diabetes to help guide him. And so, his A1C is now like 6 point something, and he's been keto for almost 2 years. So he's done great, but I use a lot of advice from them because I'm not a diabetic, so I don't really have that side to lean on. So they really helped him a great deal too. So
that's awesome, especially the earlier episodes. That was the primary thing that focus on is the whole was Carl was being coached by Richard on how his I think he was a borderline diabetic at the time, how to get that under control. What are 3 foods you think everybody should avoid?
Specific foods? Oh,
it could be you could consider like a food group. Like a lot of people were talking like general processed sugars or something like that.
Okay. Well, I feel like wheat.
Yeah.
Someone will probably strangle me for that, but wheat is not a good thing. I don't care if it's whole wheat or not. But sugar, and by sugar I mean sugar and honey and agave and fructose, right? All of those things. And I think you need to be careful with dairy. Not everybody needs to avoid it, but I think dairy is one of those things that can sneak up on you. A lot of people think, well, I'm not lactose intolerant, so I don't have a problem. But dairy can really cause problems with insulin spikes and inflammation and stuff in certain people. So for more people than you would think, you need to avoid dairy.
You're the first person to bring up dairy.
Really?
Well,
okay.
Actually, Peter brought up any food that causes a negative reaction to you. He generalized it, and he said dairy, but you're the person to specifically point out dairy as being an issue, and it actually is an issue for many people, even when they're unaware, because the inflammation it creates in their body in a subtle way, in many situations, especially with some of the ways the modern dairy is handled and processed.
Yes.
But what are 3 foods you think everybody should incorporate in their diet?
Red meat. Can I say green leafy vegetables? Is that general enough?
Yeah.
Organ meat, whether the organ is an oyster or a liver or any other gross thing. You should, though. I don't know. I haven't had the courage to try. I've had hearts, but
yeah, we made hearts recently. One of the things I could suggest to people, because freeze drying actually preserves more nutrient than almost any other preservation method.
Okay.
And one of the things I could suggest for people who are very queasy about trying to take organ meats into their diet is you can get there are several brands like what was it, Paleo Valley, and there's a couple others. Maybe I'll try to put those in the show notes. But you can get freeze dried organ complex in a capsule and just take it in concentrated dose. And some of them have broad spectrum organs. Well, they'll have some of the brain, kidneys, liver, everything in there. So you can get a dose of liver concentrated down, and you just got to make sure that there's no fillers.
Right.
And you can get these, and there are a few companies that are doing it right. And you can get, so if you're queasy about eating the organ meats yourself, you can actually get them in a supplement form that it will retain a lot of the nutrient density, and you can just pop them.
Swallow it.
Yeah.
I would try that. I would.
Yeah. I'll off the air, I'll look up a couple of the names and give you a couple. If you go to letstruck.com, they have, it's a trucking website. We had Michael Rupp from there. They do Destination Health. He was our first guest on the show. They actually have a company that they work with that is really top quality when it comes to the organ meat complex in the supplement forms, and they sell it from there. So their brand is really good.
Okay.
So that's letstruck.com.
Okay, I'll look it up.
So we got the 3 foods. What is a nutritional myth that if you could just get rid of it tomorrow, that if you can dispel it from everybody's mind, what would you do? Which one would it be?
That fruit is healthy.
That fruit is healthy. Yeah, there you go. Love my avocados.
Okay. Yes, in limited things, but you know what I mean.
Actually, no. As much as I love avocados, though, the avocados are very high on the negative food reaction chart.
They are.
So a lot.
And anything with fructose, I mean, everybody knows fatty liver and the insulin responsive fat. It just kills me whenever I go anywhere and see parents thinking they're giving their kids healthy food because they're giving them orange juice and an apple for a snack, and you're like, no.
Does even have more sugar than the sodas do.
Exactly.
And my final question is, if there was something about the medical field, the medical treatment field, that you can change overnight also, what would it be?
That could change overnight. I would say access to care. I don't know, that's a big one, but the inequity in healthcare is huge.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, how they're treated as well. People with, say, Medicaid or self-pay are not treated the same as people with private insurance.
Yeah, I have noticed too that just in my experience, short experience being in a medical field years and years ago when I was an EMT, if you came from a poor background and you were seeking painkillers, you were often more likely to be treated like a drug addict seeking a fix than if you came from a more affluent area and you were seeking painkillers, then you were just an upstanding citizen who was in pain.
Yes. Yes, it's
And
still that way.
I saw several people who had sickle cell anemia who were denied painkillers to deal with their, because they just felt that they were, and apparently there's still some debate in the medical field whether or not people are actually experiencing the pain that they say they are with sickle cell anemia. But from what I've seen, there is some severe pain that is internal that won't go away, and we still are not very clear on how to treat that.
Right. I think that's true. And for a lot of these pain things too, though, and unfortunately, if you don't have money, you can't even access a lot of the treatments. You know, I mean, things like physical therapy or a good rehab person or soft tissue mobility specialist would fix a lot of things, not sickle cell pain, but a lot of different things. But insurance doesn't pay for them, so if you don't have the money, then you're never going to access that. So then you end up living your life in pain, and then you become either disabled or addicted to either legal or illegal drugs, trying to get rid of it. It's terrible.
Yeah, and it's because originally I'm from Ohio, and the heroin level in Ohio is one of the highest in the countries. And
Oh, really?
a lot of it stemmed from people who were working literally backbreaking labor in coal mines and things, getting injured, getting very tough, high dosage of opioid medication. And then instead of being weaned off the medication was just pulled away. And one of the things that opiates do is they actually can amplify pain, with something people don't know about, but they can create almost a phantom pain even when the issue is healed. That medication is just pulled away, the person can be experiencing not only withdrawal, but this severe pain that was even worse than the original pain that they took.
Right.
And then they start seeking the opiates elsewhere.
It's, yeah. Pain is a hard one. And I think it just, this is completely off topic, obviously, but yeah, any kind of pain. Every specialty has their pain. For me, it's pelvic pain. Other people it's back pain or migraine headaches or whatever. I mean, back to diet. I think diet does have something to do with it because of inflammation. But then a lot of times, doctors don't want to treat pain, right? And part of them not wanting to treat it is because they don't really know how to treat it. So you tend to ignore what you don't know how to help, which means the longer they go with pain, then the more pain they get and the more whole body it becomes. And then you end up with the psychological effects of it and the social effects of it. And
I think I idea for our next episode together.
I think that would probably be a good one, actually.
It would be good, and that might be an idea for another series too. Is how pain management works, and get a couple of doctors in.
Yeah, talk about a multidisciplinary integrative approach. That's where you need it, for sure.
Definitely. So if anybody wants to get in contact with you or get advice, do they light a fire and send up some smoke signals, or what? How do we go?
I guess I don't know. That's a good question.
Well,
I have a clinic number, or
I know you can be to tag you into in the Facebook groups. You are in the Keto Kitchen with Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker. For the funds, you are in both of our Patreon groups.
Yep.
The Rockstar Kitchen and the Fatty Joe Show Patreon group.
Yep.
So Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker's Kitchen Rockstar group on Facebook. So I know they can if they wanted to tag you in, they could probably do that there, right?
Yes, and feel free to message me. I'm not really on any other social media. I tried Instagram, couldn't figure it out. I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't know what I'm doing there either. So, yeah.
I'm learning all the social media stuff right now. I'm working being proficient on Facebook first, and I've tried Instagram, but I've kind of not really messed with my Instagram accounts all that much lately because
Yeah.
I've been so focused on getting Facebook going and also learning who has a social media section, and we're trying to fire that one up as well.
It's
So
hard.
they have the community, you know, especially when you're making your business out of it. And you don't know much about it in the first place. So it's all been a learning curve for us.
Yeah, I feel like anybody, I mean, I'm 41, right? I'm not ashamed of my age. But anyway, I'm tail end of Gen X, right? So I miss the millennial stuff, you know. We had still had computer labs in the library in college and never got into all the technology.
Years older than you are, and yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. So
It's hard, but yes, if you, I mean, I don't know. I've never really thought about reaching me after this, but I'm open. If you want to tag me, I'll friend you.
So Facey Space is the place to go, huh?
Yeah, right.
So go to the Zuckerverse and search Dr. Dena O'Leary and Dena O'Leary, and you could find our fabulous doctor.
Yeah.
Who is so knowledgeable about everything and has been a wonderful guest.
All right.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and sign off, and make sure you listen to the outro and get all the links and stuff down on the show notes, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you for joining us on the Fatty Joe Show. Be sure to leave a comment and subscribe. It helps the show reach more people. To support the show, as well as Carrie Brown and Yogi's work on the blog, keto recipe development, masterclasses, and to gain access to private Facebook groups and other awards, go to patreon.com/thefattyjoeshow or patreon.com/Carrie Brown. Also, check out our Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker YouTube channel for video versions of The Fatty Joe Show, recipe videos, and more. Join our awesome community on the Facebook group, The Keto Kitchen with Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker, and check out our carriebrown.com website for recipes, blog posts, discounts, cookbooks, masterclasses, and other great stuff. Thank you so much.